All right. Hey there, everybody. This week we're going to build on what you've learned already, and we're going to add in another animation principle. So, your assignment this week is to have a ball jump from one platform to another, and you need to add in what's called anticipation. So, all the stuff that we've learned so far, timing, spacing, squash and stretch, slow in and slow out, all of those still apply, and then we're just going to add in anticipation. So what I've done for you here is I've set up a quick, simple scene. I'm not going to demonstrate how to do this. You can set up whatever scene you like, put in whatever background you like, add whatever platforms you like, just as long as you have a ball that has to jump from one to another, and before the jump have an anticipation where the ball builds up energy through a squash, right, and then releases it to basically make the leap. Okay, so I'm gonna make my ball jump from this lower platform to this upper platform. Pretty straightforward. I have 3 layers set up right now: a background layer, a layer for the pillars, and a layer for the ball. The ball's on top, so that the other things are behind. And before I get going, okay, because if I know that my animation has to take 48 frames or 2 seconds, that's the parameters of the assignment. Okay, imagine that you were working on a film and your director said, all right, we need the character to jump from this point to this point in 2 seconds. That's your task. So that's our task, 48 frames. So I'm going to set up my start and end at 0 and at 75. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a cushion at the end so that when it's repeating, we can have a little bit of a breath before it repeats. Okay. And then what I want to do first off is I don't know how my timing is going to work. What is a good amount of time for this jump to take? I know that the whole thing, I have 48 frames to play with, but I don't know how long this is going to take. I also don't know the path that it's going to take. So that's going to be the first thing that I'm going to set up. I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to drag it below the ball, and I'm going to call this layer arc. It's actually another animation principle. It's not our official focus, but right, most movement operates in an arc. In this case, if you think about a ball bouncing, right, it's going to bounce, come up, and go down again in an arc. So what I'd like to do is to make sure that my animation doesn't wobble from side to side is I want to try and create that arc, and I'm going to put it on another layer, and I'm just going to use a sketch pencil to do that. I'm going to put it on another layer so that I can delete it later on. And I think the ellipse tool is going to give me a good kind of arc for me to play with. Okay, so I'm going to use the transform tool over here to just start to play around with what I want this path to be. Okay, and that's starting to look pretty good. And I'm just using the skew functionality here to move the arc until I get it to where I like it. I think that path is going to be really cool to go from there to there. I'm going to call that good. And what I want to do is just erase. So I'm going to grab the eraser tool here and then make sure I have the correct one. And I'm going to erase this other part so I'm not confused. Okay, so I know that that's the path that my ball is going to take. And because it's on another layer, I can easily turn it on and off. Really nice. So the next piece that I want is to figure out if that's the path that it's going to take through space. I also want to start to figure out, and I can use this same layer to start to figure out my spacing a little bit. I'm going to put little sketch marks. I'm going to keep that same sketch tool without the eraser, right? Just like that. So I want to kind of mark out where the slow in and slow out parts are going to be, the spacing, and that way all I have to do is just line up the ball. It's going to make the animation part a little bit easier if we do this setup initially. So I know the top of the arc is going to be right here, not exactly in the center, maybe a little bit more in the center than that, something like that. Maybe let's go top of the arc. Okay, and I know that it's going to slow in right as it gets that hang time. It's going to hit the time. It's like almost going to freeze and then come back down. So I'm gonna have one frame on either side. That'll be like that, and then right the spacing has to then gradually get wider. I went a little too far there. Still too far. Get wider as we go on either side, right? We've learned that. That's how slow in and slow out works. So maybe there, and then maybe there, and then okay, the widest has to be right there. Okay, now that might be too many. We'll see, but I want to match those here on the other side because gravity acts on the ball in the same way. So I want that space, that gap to match that gap, and then that gap to match that one. So it looks like with that one, we're going to be pretty much on the ground. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the opacity of this layer and just dial it back. Okay, so it's visible, but it doesn't get in the way of what I want. And then I'm going to lock this layer so I don't mess around with it. And then the rest I'm going to work on this ball layer. So now I can start to lay in the timing of all of my main poses or my key poses for this. I know that the ball has to start on the first frame. It has to start there. And just so that my audience can be oriented and not have the movement start right away on frame one, I'm going to just have it hold for, let's say 8 frames. Okay, so maybe on frame 8, I'm going to hit a keyframe. So now it's going to hold there, and all I have to do is copy and then right click and paste it right there. So it's going to hold from frame 1 to frame 8. And I know that at the end on frame 48, and I can still paste the same thing there and then just grab the transform tool and put it in place. So I know the ball has to end there. And maybe let's give the same kind of breathing room at the end of this. Maybe it doesn't have to be quite as much, maybe on frame 45. So I'm going to copy that frame by right clicking, copy to clipboard, and paste it there. Okay, so we have a hold on either side. Good to go. I know that because the anticipation is going to be on the front side of the animation here, I know that the top here of the arc is going to have to be more towards this end of the animation as opposed to being right in the middle because we need time for that anticipation to happen. So if I look back, if this frame is where it's in that full, and I know I'm going to need a little bit of squash and stretch there. So let's back it up maybe for 4 frames. And then all I have to do, if 40 is going to be the initial landing pose, then I know that going back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're animating on 2s, which means that it's going to be frame 30. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this one and paste it. Let's try it again. Copy to clipboard and paste it on frame 30. and then move it. I'm going to take off my glove because I'm doing more with the mouse now than I am with the stylus. So let's move it up to the top. That's the top of the animation. So there, there, there. And then just play it just to make sure that that starts to feel right. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, and yes, music and sound effects, like I said before, really helps. All right, so we know it's going to have to go there. So now let's see what we can work on. Let's work on the landing part first. It's basically like what you already know how to do with the squash and stretch. We'll do that, and then the anticipation will add in later. So it's at the top of its arc there. So I know that we're animating on 2s. 2 frames later, it's going to be at that mark. So I'm just going to copy to clipboard, paste from clipboard, and then using the move tool, move it over to that hash mark. Right click, copy to clipboard, paste from clipboard, and move it over to that hash mark. Copy, paste. Okay, and I hope you're seeing why we took the time to make that the arc with the little marks. It's making it a whole lot easier for us, right? Copy, paste, here, and we might decide that we might want to put some stretch in here. Let's hold off on that for right now, just to see. Okay, copy, paste, and we're on the ground. Okay, and working backwards, we can do the same thing. Actually, let's just see if that timing feels right. Jump, boom, jump, boom. That feels pretty good. Okay, so copy, paste, move, copy, paste, move, copy, paste, move. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I might speed this footage up just, because it's so repetitive. But maybe it's worth taking the time just, so that you can relax and watch it. We'll see. Copy, paste, move, copy, paste, move. Okay, so let's see. Let's go ahead and see how that feels. See how it has that slow in and slow out at the top of the arc with the hang time? It's really nice. Boom. Boom. I mean, everything's landing really hard right now because we don't have the squash and stretch in there. And I hope you see why the squash and stretch is necessary. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's add that piece on the landing. So if it's right there, then on that one, that's gonna be the squash frame. So let's have the move tool, and this is gonna be weird. What I want to do is you kind of see if I squash, it's gonna squash in this direction. That's why I'm gonna rotate it a little bit first, okay, so that it can squash more in this direction. And remember, if it squashes down one, it has to spread out because it has the same amount of stuff. Just make sure that center point still lines up. Boom. Boom. Okay. Okay, so let's see if that worked for us in our timing. Boom. Boom. It stays squashed a little long. Okay, so I'm going to take this frame and back it up. We'll see how that feels. Yeah. Okay. Maybe one more frame. Up to you. Your call. All right. So let's work our way backwards from here. This is going to be a stretch frame. So copy, paste, move it, and then stretch it. And remember, if you stretch in one direction, you have to squash in the other. Okay, so one of the things, I don't know if you're picking up on it, but do you see where the ball is in terms of the ground? Like the ground is right there. And you see what happens? The ground moves. So what I should have done instead of the way I did it, so I'm going to clear this keyframe, is copy this keyframe instead to make sure that the ground stays where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to right click and copy that one, paste from clipboard there, and then grab the move tool instead. And now the ball is going to stay on the ground. Rotate it slightly, and remember to squash it in the opposite direction. Okay, so the liftoff, liftoff is good now. Boom. Shoop. Boom. Yeah. Like it. All right. So, which means now we need the anticipation. So let's say, let's copy this one, move 2 frames ahead, paste it, and now let's put the squash in. Okay, and anticipation in terms of a jump is really just a squash and stretch, right? You build up momentum, energy, you coil yourself down, and then release it. Think about how you jump. If you're going to really jump over a great distance, you got to coil up first and then jump. And the coil up is really just a squash. So let's do it. Let's do the squash and show you then stretching in the opposite direction. And what we want to do is not have it so fast where it's going, right? Which would happen on a land, right? Just, But in this case, when you coil up, right, you coil up and you get and you stay in that coiled up position for a while before you release. So let's have a hold that goes all the way right up to the release point. So copy, paste from clipboard. So now it's in that same position for a while. So let's see how that plays out. See how it stays, and then releases. Cool. And now we can add another little feature in here where it's like if you think about coiling up and then right where you're shaking, you shake a little bit, you build up that energy. Okay, so let's do that. We have two additional frames here to play with. So let's copy this one, paste, and I'm just going to rotate it slightly in that direction, and then copy and paste, and then rotate it back in the other direction. All right, so it's going to get a little bit of a jitter there. So if you can kind of watch it, I'm going to just go from frame to frame. So let's see how that looks. See the little wobble? It's subtle, but it makes a big difference. Okay, so we basically have our animation laid in. Right, and that's all there is to it. If you wanted to, you could then go back and fill in some of these in between frames if you thought they were necessary. But I think this animation on 2s is pretty solid, and I wouldn't expect anything more than that. But if you wanted to, you could add, say, shadow. Okay, because we seem to be in a world where the light is coming from this direction, and we have some shadows. So the ball would be casting a shadow onto this pillar. Why don't we add that? I'm going to first turn off the arc. We don't need that anymore. And I'm going to add another layer for the shadow. I'm going to put it underneath the ball and rename it as shadow. So let's just take a few minutes and put in some shadows. Go back to frame 1. The shadows that would be cast on here would be the same color as this shadow. So I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to make sure I lock the ball layer so I don't mess that up anymore. And I'm on the shadow layer, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to pick that kind of shadow color, and the brush I'm going to use maybe this one. Does that look good? Ooh, that's too dark. What about this brush? Still too dark. Let's maybe turn down the opacity on that and increase the size. Still a little dark. Dial the opacity way back. There. That's what we want. Subtle. Okay, so if we say that that's the shadow there, it's not going to change there. We might have a new shadow there, so I'm going to turn on keyframes there and just go back and forth just to see how that feels. Make sure the shadows match. It's darker in that second one, but I kind of like it. So I'm just going to go back to this one and add a little bit more. Nice. Okay, so the shadow's not going to really change through all this really subtle animation, but it will definitely change there. So new keyframe. Okay, good. And then the shadow won't be kind of debating. I mean, the light is coming from like this direction. So going forward, and if it's coming like this, going forward, the shadow would be more over here. So I'm going to move forward to this. I'm going to make a new keyframe and then just put it right here. Make sure that it doesn't go over. Go. See how that feels. Should be darker. And then gone. It needs to be gone by then. And we're gonna move forward. Boom. We're gonna see the shadow till maybe there. So new keyframe. New keyframe. keyframe is getting smaller. And back. Okay, so let's see how that all looks. Nice. Call that done. Just like last time, you're free to add any embellishments you want. If you want to add extra animation or you want to do more work on the background, if that's what you like. But this is good. Like, we have squash, stretch, timing, spacing, anticipation, the new skill for this week. It's good to go. All right, good luck. I know you can do it.